Okay, so this week we're talking about the Empire of Mali. Um, so it's important to remember from about 700 to approximately 1600, the ancient empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai controlled vast areas of West Africa. And although each empire kind of rose to assert its power, they coexisted independently for centuries. At its peak, the Mali Empire covered an area that encompasses significant portions of present day Mali, Mauritania, and Senegal, an area larger than Europe. Shillington, in History of Africa, that I asked you to read for this week, describes how in the early 1200s, a branch of the Soninke people of the Kingdom of Ghana, called the Soso or Susu, represented by the figure of Sumeoro in the Epic of Sundiata, established a new and separate area largely based on raiding and conquest. Kumbisala, the ancient capital of Ghana, was captured in around 1225, no doubt to take over the lucrative trade exchange for salt and gold. Legend has it that someone named Sundiata Keita of the Malinke people organized a resistance to the Soso expansion and defeated their army at a great battle at Karina. Sundiata went on to unite the Soninke people of the former Ghana kingdom and the Malinke clans, and his vast empire became known as Mali. The capital is believed to have been in a place called, as the epic says, Niani. Although there's been quite a bit of excavation there, it's now just a small village. Not much has been found from before 1500, so they're not really sure if this is the site. So it's known that although later in the Empire of Mali, Islam was adopted. In its early days in the 1200s, its religion was primarily agricultural and ancestor based. That is, one's ancestors were believed to be embodied in the spirits of the land. The chief or leader, called the Mansa, was both a religious and a secular leader, and was believed to be most closely in touch with the ancestors and the spirits of the land. In the Empire of Mali, traditional village or clan or provincial leaders called firma were left in place, and they paid tribute to the chief Mansa or ruler of Mali, basically to support the army. The army, who was chiefly effective and notable for its use of cavalry, defended the kingdom and protected trade routes and made sure that the tribute or tax was paid. Like in the Kingdom of Ghana, much wealth was also gained through levies on trade that passed through Mali, and Mali controlled about 2/3 of the world's gold supply. Unlike Ghana, however, which depended mostly on taxation of the salt and gold trade, Mali was farmer based and also produced a lot of crops like sorghum, millet, and rice. Farmers were also considered a very high caste or class, social class. In the Sahel or shore region of the Sahara, there were also a lot of pastoralists with large herds of camels, sheep, and goats. The Mansa also had large farms that were manned by slaves and would support the royal administration and the army with food. And of course, gold remained a really large export. Once the empire began to adopt Islam, the gold miners were especially adverse to this and to any efforts to convert them. And if they were, if you did try to convert them, it led to their refusing to supply gold, and so they were largely left alone. At some point, cowrie shells from the Indian Ocean began to be used as a medium of exchange within the empire instead of gold. So the Epic of Sundiata, an oral history passed down by griots or jelly, these sort of bards, I guess we'd call them, in the Western tradition. The The Epic of Sundiata records the foundation of the Malian dynasty. It's a great story in itself, and it's important to remember that myth, though, is not history. It can be a refraction of broad historical events, but especially when you're dealing with an oral tradition, the myth will be continuously updated and modified to also reflect contemporary concerns and values. In this sense, an oral myth is kind of a living, right? It's a living myth versus a myth that has been written down, like say Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, that has been sort of frozen in time. We might interpret it from our point of view, but the text itself is frozen. In the case of the Epic of Sundiata, historians suggest that it reflects the early importance of hunter guilds as warriors, the resistance to the socio-territorial domination that I described above, and also initial conquests under a leader called Sundiata. He also goes by a number of other names as well, as you'll see or will have seen when you read the story. Some suggest that the defeat of the sorcerer king Sumeoro represents a transition from blacksmiths, who were believed to have a lot of power and who were called sorcerers, to hunter warriors as the political elite. Aspects of the myth also reflect what might be called plausible history, such as troubled family relations among leaders with multiple wives, an apparent social stratification that gradually sort of evolved, where you have freeborn, you have different castes according to social classes according to one's job or occupation, and then slaves. And it also perhaps reflects the change to a male dominated political class. Certainly, one can detect, I think, Malian or Mali cultural values, like the high regard for women's political, familial, and spiritual power, or the high value put on generosity, or the warning to leaders for sexual restraint, or how to organize effectively military collaboration. And there's, of course, much more to the story itself that makes it in some ways timeless, right? You've got the jealousy and friction in polygamous marriages, with wives mainly being concerned about looking out for the welfare of their children. You've got a disabled kid, right, who overcomes his infirmity. And you've got a clear good versus evil with Sumeoro as the perfect villain. Thanks for listening.